My name is Sam Spofforth. I'm Executive Director and Coordinator with Clean Fuels Ohio, and I'm also President of the Transportation Energy Partners. And I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar, which is on getting the most out of this year's Energy Independence Summit. Well, first, Transportation Energy Partners, or TEP, is entering its 6th year as an organization, and this April will also mark the 6th Energy Independence Summit. And it's gotten better every year. It's certainly better attended every year. I think last year was substantively probably the best summit that we've had. It's really becoming the premier fuel and technology neutral energy policy conference in the nation. Before we get started, I'd like to just personally thank Stephanie Smith from the South Shore Clean Cities, who's done an outstanding job working with Ken Brown and his entire team to set up this webinar. Next slide. Oh, actually, that's the right slide. So here are the panelists for today's webinar. We have Alleyn Harned from Virginia Clean Cities, Rita Ebert from Greater Long Island Clean Cities, Stephanie Meyn from Western Washington Clean Cities, and Ken Brown, who is our consultant, our government affairs consultant for TEP. Next slide. So in terms of the agenda today, we're going to have an overview of the independence of the Energy Independence Summit for 2013, and then a few words about last year's summit from Stephanie Meyn. After that, we'll do a little bit more of a detailed review of the agenda for this coming year's summit, and Ken will provide that. And then Rita is going to talk about just the strategies, and based on her own personal experience and having attended many of these summits, in how you get the most out of the summit, and especially the day that we spend on Capitol Hill. Then Alleyn is going to talk about tips for effective advocacy and education. He's done a lot of this kind of work, both as a coordinator and then in prior jobs that he's had. And then we're going to wrap up with Ken talking about assistance that TEP can provide for Clean Cities coordinators, just kind of understanding how that is going to work this year. So first, a little bit about TEP itself. I think most people know a little bit about the organization, but I'll just give a short overview. We are a nonprofit organization that focuses on advanced transportation energy deployment, and we're closely in line and have many members that are Clean Cities coalitions. The organization is not formally affiliated with the U.S. Department of Energy, but we obviously work with a lot of Clean Cities. We work with the DOE and a wide range of industry stakeholders. A majority of the TEP board members are actually Clean Cities coordinators, and we have many board members that are key allies and supporters from industries that we work with. So we provide policy support to the nation's Clean Cities coalitions and our 13,000 stakeholders collectively. We also keep coalitions and stakeholders informed about key policy issues, programs, and funding opportunities, and then we educate these decision makers about the importance of advancing markets for clean fuels and vehicles. And I just add that the other function of the organization is to provide an umbrella, a nonprofit organizational umbrella for many of the nonprofit coalitions around the U.S. So now I'd like to turn things over to Stephanie Meyn, who's going to give a brief overview of this year's summit and last year's.
Thank you, Sam. As Sam mentioned, I am on the Transportation Energy Board, or Energy Partners Board, and as well I'm working as the Coordinator Outreach Chair for Energy Independence Summit this year. So I really want to continue to develop the relationship with coordinators and making sure that anyone who attends is really comfortable with the materials they have. If they are new to the Energy Independence Summit and would like mentoring, we'd really want to open those channels of communication this year and make sure that we get as much coordinator participation as possible. So in a couple of slides, Ken Brown will actually go into the specific details about the agenda. But I'm just generally going to go over what Energy Independence Summit 2013 is going to be all about and what it really means to coordinators. Really, for me especially, I remember the first time I went to this, it's really about learning the latest in federal policies and funding sources. Many times, if we're engaged at the local level, I know I get a lot of phone calls from people saying, what is happening on the, in the funding sources or incentives that are coming. And I can usually talk to this, what's happening at the state level or the local level. But when it comes to what's happening at the federal level, to me, Energy Independence Summit is the one place I can get a broad view of what's happening across several federal departments, what the industry policy folks are doing, what the lobbyists for the different industry associations are up to. So you get a nice broad picture of what's happening federally. And that gives you a lot of power as a coordinator locally to say, well, as a matter of fact, there's a lobbying effort around that happening in DC, or we know that, departmentally that's what they're focused at Department of Energy this year. As well, you can really meet those key federal decision makers. At last year's EIS, we had representatives from FTA, Departments of Agriculture, Departments of Transportation, EPA, Energy, GSA, Defense. Like you name the federal department, we had decision makers that were there. So it's really, I can't emphasize enough what a one-stop shop this is. You can also meet the key industry leaders from around the country. I think EIS has gotten better every year in involving more and more of the OEMs. So you'll often meet not just, oftentimes we deal locally with kind of the fleet sales side of a lot of the businesses, but at EIS you'll meet a lot of the public affairs and policy directors from these large industries and OEMs. So it's a chance to really understand the policy direction for a lot of these companies. And I can't, again, emphasize enough what an opportunity this is, and you're going to hear this theme throughout the webinar about strengthening relationships. My classic example about what EIS has done for me is that for the first couple of years that I went, which was I started 4 years ago, I would meet with every congressional office that would listen to me, and formed a relationship with the first congressional district, the congressman that was there. And just this past year, he was elected to governor of the state. And so by developing this relationship with a congressperson, now when that person as governor is thinking, what group can I work with to deploy or to find out what fleets are thinking, what policy direction to head in, they already know who to talk to and reach out to. And so I can't emphasize enough what these relationships have done for our coalition. And again, if you have any issues about whether this is construed as lobbying, if you're housed in a government agency, I'd be happy to talk with you personally about my experience and how I've been able to work with that and deal with that to a very positive end. And then lastly, and I guess it ties into what I was saying before, this is really an opportunity to send a message about how important the Clean Cities program is. A lot of the people you talk to may not have heard of your program. They know in general what Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies program might be about. They know about alt fuels. But the fact that you are someone local on the ground in their district who can implement these projects, it makes you an incredible commodity. They really, once they figure out what you're capable of, they will come to you. They will start seeing the importance of having that local affiliate with Clean Cities, as well as someone who is tied into a national program. Next slide. So I guess the next couple of slides are just to reflect on Energy Independence Summit last year, to emphasize the kind of people that we have speaking there. The first day we generally get the overview from a lot of heavy hitters. You can see there we had the chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality there, a governor, really high-level people, high-level thinkers and influencers. And this year promises to have a lot of those heavy hitters again. And this is just a slide of a few of the highlights from last year as well. You can see there's a lot of networking opportunities, opportunities to award, senators and congressmen for their incredible work. And that really, again, re-emphasizes that connection with us, as the famous picture of Rita and Congressman Israel is showing there. So we really hope that this next year will be yet another improvement and growth on what we saw last year. We had nearly 200 participants last year, and we hope to have here. In terms of just the discounts for coordinators, for those of you who have gone in the past, you recognize that we've always given complimentary registration to all coordinators. If you are in a co-coordinator situation, again, we allow the complimentary registration to be extended to all coordinators, but the travel assistance is really only one per coalition. So anyone that is, a direct staff, direct coordinator gets complimentary registration again, but the travel assistance is only one per coalition. So you either have to bunk up or get extra rooms if you have more than one person from your coalition attending. And just to add clarity to that as well, in the past, the tradition has been that TEP has given travel assistance of 3 nights of free lodging for people from the West Coast or Mountain time zones, and 2 nights of free lodging for those from the east and central parts of the country. That assistance will continue for those of you who are TEP members or are donors. So if you have trouble getting membership, depending on how your coalition is structured, TEP this year is also accepting donations, if that's a way that you can channel that. Just an added tip for myself, I actually put my TEP membership under a travel coding because it is sort of helping to pay for travel to EIS. So there's different creative ways you can do that to help pay for your TEP membership or donor sponsorship, so to speak. And for those who are not TEP members, the travel assistance is basically reduced by 1 night from what we've traditionally had. So I've gotten lots of emails about the assistance. I hope I've clarified that. If you've got any questions about how it works, I know every coalition has its own sort of different quirks and leadership and different representatives who want to go. So if you have any questions about that, by all means, just email me or call me, and I can help clarify that. And again, just to emphasize, the deadline for that, the discounts and the complimentary registration is February 15th. So get all your forms in as soon as possible so we can get the registrations completed by the middle of next month. And from there, I think I'm passing it over to Ken. So take it away.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie, very much. Hi, everybody. This is Ken Brown. I think, as most of you know, I work with TEP in Washington, D.C., and I'm playing a role in helping to organize this year's summit, as I did last year. So I'd like to, before I give a brief review of the agenda for this year's summit, I just want to underscore, obviously we hope as many coalitions and coordinators can be at the summit as possible. It helps to strengthen our message. It shows the grassroots clout of the alternative fuels vehicle movement, and the combination of the coalitions and the industry stakeholders really makes a difference in our work on Capitol Hill. Secondly, I just want to encourage you all, and you'll hear a little bit more about this, to bring stakeholders if you can, industry stakeholders. That really makes a difference. And third, we're going to use this webinar and others to make sure that you all are as prepared for the summit this year as possible, and want to improve communication to you all in advance of the summit so everybody's as prepared as possible. So I'm going to give a brief whoops, sorry, I think somebody accidentally muted me. We'll begin on Sunday evening with an informal gathering at the hotel where folks can do some networking, and we'll start with the formal program bright and early on Monday morning. We'll have a keynote address, probably from a senior official within the Obama administration, as we did last year. Then we'll have a round table. Last year's was great, with industry leaders representing the the various different fuels and fleets and equipment manufacturers to talk about the state of the industry and particular barriers and opportunities that they face. Then we'll get hear some presentations on some of the leading and most innovative state policies and programs. At lunchtime on Monday, we're hope to have another governor this year. We're focused on trying to get the governor of Virginia, who's done a lot of innovative things. So we're working with folks there to see if we can get him to come. In the afternoon, we'll have some round tables on innovative finance mechanisms and also on research and development policies at the federal level. And then we'll finish up the afternoon with a focus on making sure everybody's ready for Tuesday's Capitol Hill Day. Next slide, please. Oh, and then we'll finish with a reception on Monday evening. Tuesday will be Capitol Hill Day. We're going to do it a little different this year. Instead of having breakfast on the Hill, we're going to have breakfast at the hotel and then head up to Capitol Hill early. We'll do a briefing with members of Congress and staff on the Hill, and then folks will head out to their meetings all day long. Then we will reconvene at the UPS Townhouse where we had our breakfast last year, but we'll reconvene there in the evening for a reception for our folks, and then it'll also be an opportunity you can invite Congressional staff that you meet with throughout the day to, if they want to stop by at the reception at the UPS Townhouse. And then on Wednesday, we'll spend a half a day back at the hotel. We'll start with a quick debrief of our Capitol Hill Day meetings, and then the focus will be to work with the and meet with the government agencies, and we'll have two sessions. First will be a roundtable discussion with senior officials from the various federal agencies, and then we'll follow it up with something that people really liked last year, and the agencies liked it as well. We call it speed dating with the federal agency officials, and essentially individuals, representatives from the various agencies will be positioned at round tables around the room, and it will be an opportunity for folks to go and meet with them, exchange cards, ask questions, have discussions with the program managers to learn about the latest in funding opportunities from the various agencies, and get your questions answered if you're running into roadblocks or hurdles or need some assistance with anything. So in a nutshell, that's an overview of the agencies. And obviously, after you hear from Rita and Alleyn, we'll have an opportunity to get questions from you all and discussion afterwards. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rita Ebert, who's both a member of the Transportation Energy Partners Board and the coordinator for the Greater Long Island Clean Cities.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, we'll go to the first slide. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited about talking about this wonderful experience that you'll have or you have had. One of the major things for making the most out of your trip is to bring local coalition stakeholders. Last year I brought a couple of our stakeholders which talked about their business, their growing business. You know, speaking to the congressional leaders and the senators, I feel that bringing a local group also shows them the work that's being done in your area, how it's boosting the economy, and how the small business and large businesses are taking off. The best example of the Clean Cities is I have brought a few of my ARA recipients with me. So I was able to tell our leaders that, you know what, thank you very much for this funding, and, you know, this is, you know, so many jobs have been created. They love to hear success stories. No matter who you speak to on the Hill, they love success stories, and we love to hear them too. You have to make sure that you're knowledgeable about key issues that are going on right now. One of the major things that you need to know is what committees do your congressional leaders and senators sit on? Because you're not only going to thank them for their previous support and let them know exactly what's going on in their districts, but you want to also know what their interests are, and you could pop it in there and say, hey, by the way, thank you, you're doing a great job on name another committee that they're on. Next slide. Make sure that your meetings are with the most important members of the Congress. Every year I had previously met with both my senators, New York State Senator Schumer and Gillibrand, and also all of my congressional leaders, which I have 5 on Long Island. It's also important to meet with other members of Congress that are on these committees that help and back clean cities. If you have a member of Congress that are on one of these committees and you don't feel, secure, or you're not too sure what to say, one of us will be more than happy to join you on this. We really have to get to the key members of Congress. We have to tell them how important it is, clean cities, and the work that we do. Another important issue is contact the media and let them know about your trip. You can contact them ahead of time by just sending over a fax, and then you should contact them again and let them know exactly who you met with and what the response was. And you'd be surprised. The media loves to thrive on this. And you could also ask the Congressional office to put them in a press release. Follow up with your Congressional office throughout the year. Invite them to events and activities. This should not be a one-time thing all year. We have been very successful with all of our congressional leaders and senators. We invite them to every grand opening, our alternative fuel annual conference. Any opportunity we have to invite them. One, they bring along the press, which helps get the word of clean cities out there. 2, they love to come and get their picture taken. And the other one is, having our congressional leaders around us and seeing what we do really puts a mark on our hard work. They like to, shine down D.C. and show everyone else what they're doing in their district. So invite them not only throughout the year, put them on your email list. Show them your newsletter that goes out. If they can't make it, they will send someone from their office. And we've been very lucky to have our congressional leaders very responsive to us. Next slide. We want to build on your organization. Increase the visibility, more members, more funding. When you go to D.C. and you're bringing stakeholders, you're showing that you are promoting not only clean cities, but the economy, all the businesses around your district. This is very, very important. The more we show that we're in strength, the more funding opportunities we're going to have. Educate policymakers and influence the debate. You need to know what policies are at hand. And I think knowing a little bit before you get to D.C. would be a great idea. We had spoken earlier, the panelists, about how you can go on to the TEP website and see who the main congressional leaders and senators that are on committees, who we should be meeting with. If he's not in your district, join up with someone else that he is in your district, or just make an appointment and go see them and tell them, this is what we do, thank you very much. I think going to these meetings in a whole big group is much better. If you're afraid that the whole group cannot fit into the office, because some of these offices are very small, don't let that worry you. We have taken meetings to the hallway. So get as many people as possible in your groups for your visits. Last year we had 17 people in our senators meeting. We had all the coordinators in New York State come with their stakeholders. So it was very, very informative, and I think when they see more people, they're inclined to listen to you because they know that you have put everything you can into this, and you want to show them this is what we're doing for the people of, like, say, Long Island. You have to build long-term relationship. When I say this, is not just to, like I said before, just don't go down to D.C. for the one day. Invite these congressional leads. Invite legislators to your meetings. This is common sense. You have to get people involved in your coalition. They're not going to come knock on your door. You have to reach out to them and invite them. And the next slide. Do I have a next slide? Oh, well, my whole point is you're going to get more bang for your buck the more you put into it. Know who your congressional leaders are, know what committees they sit on, and also bring stakeholders. It's very important, and it shows that we work better in strength. If anybody has any questions about going on these visits, how to set up appointments, I'll be more than happy to help you. Another key thing, when you go on these appointments, bring a folder. There's plenty of Clean Cities folders. Put your information there, maybe your annual report, a newsletter, and always, 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 when you call to make an appointment, make sure you say thank you, follow up with it, make sure you have the appointment, and when you come home, write out a letter and say thank you for your time, because their time is very valuable as well. So make sure you always say thank you and follow up in the next month and tell them what's going on, what came out of this meeting. So it's important to have good contacts in D.C. And that's it for me. And now I'll introduce Alan. Alan?
Rita, thank you for that introduction. I hope everybody can hear me okay. And if you can't, I'm sure someone will chime in. My part of this, I want to talk about everybody wants to have fun, and one way to have fun while we're doing this delightful activity is to know what we're doing and to make it easy. So, knowing what we're doing, you want to be prepared. Consider these goals in advance. Review your realistic goals for congressional representatives in your territory and locations, and know what you're asking about. You may have a different ask for different congressional leaders, but you'll want to articulate that appropriately. TEP is going to help with a great national message with a request for action, but you may have local needs. If you have several local needs, this is not the place for that. This might be the place for one local need. It really is these TEP needs that are achievable. And if you give them a laundry list, they're not going to be able to play with that. But I would say be prepared, absolutely be prepared for oddball questions. You're in there as a chance, maybe once in the year to educate them, or once in a couple months, and it gives you a chance to answer their questions and the very diverse misconceptions about alternative fuels. If you've heard it on the news, you bet that the congressional representatives have heard it, because oftentimes they're playing the news right through their office. So be prepared to answer their questions and to say that you'll follow through on follow back up with anything you can't answer. Next slide. What we're talking about here is relationships. We've got to be polite and respectful, even when folks are not polite or respectful to you. If you get any sort of pushback from your congressional reps or the staff, and oftentimes, universally, you're going to be meeting with the staff. They might they might have an attitude, they might have had a bad day, but regardless, you're going to be able to help them come through to a good day, because what we're talking about here is universally supported. It's a bipartisan program. So what we're talking about is building long-term support. So and developing and fostering these relationships. So you may have some relationships with your congressional staff, but it's time to make the new ones, and especially as folks move on and change between different positions. That's the way to go. So obviously, these staffers, we're going to be meeting with them at their federal offices, but if you've got friends in the district offices, list them by name. It's these relationships with the local offices, the state offices, and then in your own local districts back at home. So give examples of, I guess, what I like to do. In Virginia, we've got 11 congressional reps and 2 senators, of course, so it's difficult to meet with all of them. So we make a targeted list, and then we give examples about locally about what we're doing in each of those districts in alternate fuels and why that's important. And that absolutely helps with your leaders in those relationships, is making that local connection. Next slide. Again, local. We want to have the information come to each of the districts, but you also want to pull in industry stakeholders to provide the facts and figures with you. So communicating with them generally on alternate fuels and how they benefit the local district is hugely effective, as well as with the Senate folks just talking about all of your state. One thing that is very helpful is, of course, bringing in these big hitter stakeholders. So that includes both the private sector for folks that can bring in their stakeholders, and each of them probably actually has a lobbying arm that would be interested in joining you for these educational visits. We had, for our last year's visits, we had Volkswagen, which is headquartered in Virginia, and then we had Volvo and Cummins, and Volvo makes the natural gas trucks for all of North America in Virginia. And having those guys along with us was a huge help. The other folks we had with us were the state energy office. We had essentially the state energy office and the governor's appointee with us talking about how it was valuable to the state. So, combining all of those in a positive way, and of course, there's going to be various limitations to each of those. It really shows the values of the stakeholder and industry diversity that we have, and of course, fleet leaders would be good as well. So the team leader should introduce the group. You should introduce the group and the purpose of the meeting, but go around to your individuals. And if you can pull in a big dog or a heavy hitter stakeholder, maybe target your one or your two stakeholders that you can bring out with you that are very impactful to these congressional districts. That person can tell a story that's as compelling. And when you have industry, or somebody that maybe even as a fundraiser for the congressional rep, that pulls in some good stuff. So some tools, you could use opensecrets.org to see who are some of the top donors for your folks. And if you got any questions, folks, you guys can call me anytime, and I would be very happy to softball. So one example in Virginia was with the local politics was, we were able to secure a meeting with Eric Cantor, who is the minority leader, and he's had significant additional cooperation and interest in alternative fuels as a result of our meetings. We've met with staff before, but when we went in with some big businesses and big stakeholder partners with the Republican governor's office, we were able to, and Eric Cantor is a Republican, for example, we were able to really make some good results, and he's got an ethanol station picture that's framed on his wall. So anyway, there's some good stuff. So next slide. I guess I'll reiterate that follow-through is very important. At the start of this, you want to plan out what you intend to do. You want to do it, and then you want to follow back up. So that includes keeping in touch with the district offices, following up on requests for action. If they ask you a question, you try to answer it, but if you don't know the answer, get it back to them in rapid time. Send them thank you notes. Stay in touch. Invite them to all of your events that you would want them to be at, or that would be of value to them. And Rita mentioned this as well, but it brings the press. The congressmen are fantastic speakers, and we've had several of our events go up in significant scale when we have a congressional representative there, and it's a good place to get video footage as well, and for yourself as well as for others. So that concludes my tips. Again, plan it in advance. To make it easy on yourself, think about what you want to do it, and then follow back up on those components. And there are people that are here to help. I'm here to help if you've got questions. So. And I'd like to introduce Ken Brown again.
Thank you, Alan. Great job. What I'd like to do, a couple of things. One, I want to encourage, if anybody's got questions, you can type your questions in the chat box, question box there on the right side of your screen, and we can take those. Secondly, you can go to the next slide. What I'd like to talk briefly about is, again, the assistance that the TEP team is able to provide to all of you in helping you get ready for the summit. First, I want to remind folks that, again, that Stephanie Meyn is coordinating outreach to coordinators for the summit. We have a team of other coordinators who are working with Stephanie to make calls and do outreach to all of you. So if you haven't heard from somebody, you should be hearing, and it's another opportunity. They're going to be encouraging you to attend. They can answer your questions, but again, we want as many of you as possible to register and attend the summit. Secondly, Stephanie talked about the financial assistance. Thirdly, I want to emphasize again, last year, for the first time, we made an effort to build state teams for Capitol Hill Day, for the meetings on Capitol Hill. Again, there were a few glitches in the communications about those teams, and I think it caught a few people by surprise. I think for the most part, the teams worked fairly well. So what we would like to do is to have better communication about it this time. But again, we want to encourage you, and the model is essentially, number one, if there are more than one coalition in a particular state, we wanted to encourage coordination amongst those coalitions in terms of your meetings where possible. In particular, if there are 4 coalitions in the state of Florida, it doesn't make sense for the 4 coalitions to do 4 different meetings with your Senate offices, for example. It's confusing to the Senate offices. So as Rita did with the other New York coalitions, they all went together to the Senate offices, and we would like to encourage that. And in some cases, the teams from different states, for example, I think in California, what we ended up doing was there was a Northern California team and a Southern California team, and that way those folks all worked together very effectively in meeting with, we were able to cover more meetings and people could do it as a group. And there are a lot of advantages of teaming up with folks in your state. You, again, amplify the message. The second thing we attempted to do last year was to, for the first time last year at the summit, we had a large number of industry stakeholders who attended the summit and participated with us on Capitol Hill Day. And as both Alleyn and Rita mentioned, having them participate in the congressional meetings helped to make the message much stronger, more powerful, and rooted in examples in the private sector where folks could talk about job creation and manufacture of vehicles and building of new infrastructure and all those kinds of things, and could talk about how the incentives and the funding really matter from the private sector standpoint. And so, again, we want to encourage folks to both bring stakeholders from your community, but also to be open to having other industry stakeholders who might be attending the summit, who might be from your state, or who might have plants or facilities in your state, to be open to having them join with you. And what we're going to attempt to do is to let people know further in advance who's interested in being on your team, so we can have those set up a little bit more in advance. And we just want to improve the communication. Now, we understand that there may be some of you who, for various reasons, are not able to have industry folks go with you. So if you can help communicate that to us in advance, we can help do better coordination and communication in regards to the teams. Next up, scheduling meetings. Last year, the TEP consulting team helped many coalitions actually schedule your meetings. I think folks that we did that for generally really appreciated that. We were able to do that in advance, set up a good schedule, make sure you had a full schedule with lots of meetings. So we are available to do that again this year. So if you can, we will continue to reach out to you both through coordinators and ourselves here, and let you know that we're available to help schedule those meetings. If you can please let us know in advance if you'd like scheduling help, that would be great. You can email me at kenbrown318@gmail.com, and we'll reach out to you as well. In addition, this year we're going to provide a sample press release that you can use related to the summit, that you can fill in some local examples, and you can use that both before and after attending the summit. We will again provide materials, messaging, and talking points related to the TEP message. Again, I think as Alleyn and Rita both mentioned, we will have a national TEP message related to key federal policies, programs, and funding, and then obviously you're encouraged to use local examples and talk about local needs as well. But we will have both handouts that you can leave behind. We'll have a national message, and we'll have talking points for you all. And in addition, we will hold a webinar either in late February or early March for you all and all the summit participants to talk about the national issues, to give you a little primer on what's going to be on the TEP agenda, what's hot, so to make sure people are prepared in advance before you come to Washington, and you can get a chance to ask questions and think about these things, think about local examples that can help you make your case. Finally, I think as everybody mentioned, we want to, there are a number of experienced coordinators who've had many years coming to Washington and many years participating in the summit who are available to help provide mentoring for folks either who've only done this a couple of times or if it's your first time to help you get prepared and answer your questions and make sure that you're ready in April. So with that, I think I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions that people have. So here's a question. For other coalitions that bring stakeholders, do you pay for their travel or do they pay their own way? No, in terms of the travel assistance that TEP provides, it's only one person per coalition. So that's all we're able to do. And so stakeholders will be required to pay their own way, both travel and registration. If they do join TEP as an associate member, they can get a reduced registration fee.
Hey, Ken, Sam?
Yep.
Just to add a little bit, I want to make sure people understand. I think most people do know this, especially if you've been involved with this event in the past, but for those who may be new, this is a sponsored event. So right now, the board, the TEP board, is in the process of raising funding from industry partners from a wide range of industries to help to underwrite the funds that are used primarily to pay to help defray the travel and the hotel, and then also to be able to afford to offer complimentary registrations to coordinators. So you know, this is a pretty big undertaking every year to raise funds from sponsors, and of course we'll have all that information on the website for the summit. Would encourage people to thank those who step forward and sponsor the event. And if you have thoughts about who would sponsor in addition, let us know.
That's great. Thanks, Sam. There's a question, how is the one-night stay paid? Do you pay the hotel directly or give us a check? we pay the hotel directly. How much does it cost for TEP membership? The membership for coalitions is $175. So essentially, if you're a coalition and you pay the $175, you will get that. You will get more than that back in terms of the additional night at the hotel. So in a sense, this is an investment by TEP to build our membership, but so it's kind of a no-brainer if you're coming to join or contribute to TEP, because it's $175 to join, and you get an additional night at the hotel, which is, I think, a little more than $200. There's some questions, Stephanie, that I'd like you to take this one. One is, I'm an MPO employee as well as a coordinator. I'd like to attend the summit, but I'm afraid it will be perceived as lobbying. Do other government employees attend? Stephanie, you want to take that one?
Sure, and I will say that there are a lot of experienced people who can add to this. I can speak mostly to my own experience, but I had those exact same questions come up. Certainly, if you're in a state agency that also gets federal funding, you need to be careful about how your time is paid there, because you definitely want to be careful about federal funding. But otherwise, if you're in a state or a local government, I mean, I'm very clear that what I'm doing there is educating and relationship building. If you're very clear about what your talking points are, and I can share all of the information I have, with a follow-up email or phone call. But I'm just very clear about when I'm going in there to talk to the representatives that I'm not there asking for specific monies or anything like that, but that I'm talking to them about, the types of projects that I've done, educating them about what we can do, telling them about some of the barriers that my coalition members have faced. And really, I mean, I look at it as having a conversation and educating. And sometimes they do look at me like, okay, what's your ask? They're used to a lot of lobbying. So you just clarify with them what your purpose is there. I know a lot of other people have experience. I know, Alan, if you want to chime in, that, doing this, that there are definitely tools that we can give to your bosses to help explain what it is you're doing there. I'm happy to share those points by email or in a letter that you could send to your managers or your executive directors in your organization. And then as well, we have a lot of tips and pointers from others who do this to make sure that what you're doing there is not construed as lobbying.
So this is Alan, and I've got the convenience of being able to put on one hat that's a nonprofit hat, but I also work. Our program works with a state university, and what we do is we bring in our state energy office. This is a Virginia interest. So if the question is about a particular office, your department your government department might not have a quote lobbying arm, but you may have essentially a policy and relationships initiative on these same fronts, and just talk to your bosses about it. So begin that dialogue, and you'll find those barriers come down fairly quickly, and they might actually appreciate you getting up there and talking about these things, especially if they're running the programs as a result. So I hope that's helpful. But again, it's sort of you pair up with the folks in those offices. I would say, just to be sure that you're not billing this back to a federal grant. Certainly use a source of funding other than direct federal funds for this, if that's possible. And a lot of times, in offices, there's administrative dollars that come in. So you've got that same kind of administrative funds that you could use. So.
And this is Ken, and to clarify just from a technical standpoint, and we can help you work on this, but a couple of things. One is It's only lobbying if you're actually advocating for a specific piece of legislation or for a specific budget allocation. So it's only defined as lobbying. So if you're going into a meeting and you're talking about examples of what's going on at home, if you're talking generally about why it's important to have federal funding and incentives, that actually does not meet the technical definition of lobbying. If you're walking in and saying, I urge you to support, Senate Bill number 314, then that is considered lobbying. So there's a fine line there. So it's important to understand that. But providing information, examples, why it's important to have federal support in terms of funding and incentives, that actually does not meet the technical definition of lobbying. And TEP provides both handouts that are more educational in nature as opposed to those that are more lobbying and advocacy in nature. We have both sets of handouts that you can use. Secondly, different organizations have different policies related to quote unquote lobbying. Government agencies are in fact allowed to lobby, though those of you that work for government agencies, each of those have their own policies and procedures related to doing that, and so you need to check within your organization to figure out what you're able to do and what you're not able to do. And different nonprofits have different rules set up within those organizations. So just encourage you to know within your organization what your particular policies and procedures are. And finally, if you do engage in any lobbying activity, as Alleyn mentioned, it's important that you not use any federal grant funds to pay for that purpose. That's not allowed. That's strictly prohibited by the federal law. And when you get your grant money, you actually sign papers that say that you're not going to do that. I'm looking to see if anybody else have any other questions out there. Stephanie, do you want to say any more about outreach?
I guess, as you mentioned, you'll be hearing from a lot of the different members of the TEP board. I encourage you, if you have questions, you're sort of on the fence about it and just want to hear from more people about what the experience is, I just highly recommend it. I went to my very first Energy Independence Days within months of starting as a coordinator, and it was kind of overwhelming. But it was a zero regret situation for me. As soon as I did it, I recognized the value. And so I just want to encourage all of you who might not be familiar with it. I really feel like every year it gets better and bigger and more influential. And I think I just really encourage you to come. And if you have any questions or hesitations or need clarity, I'm here. So please call and expect some calls from other coordinators to help you with that decision and assist you with any questions you have or any issues that might come up.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. Sam, any closing words?
Just that I'd also emphasize, in addition to coming yourself, it is a great opportunity for your stakeholders and also for your fleets. Last year we took some great steps in involving a lot more industry stakeholders in this event. And this year we want to build on that by not only involving industry stakeholders, but involving a lot of fleets, because they can really tell the story in a very compelling way that people will respond to in Washington. Again, thanks for joining us this afternoon and this morning, if it's still this morning for people on the call. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us and ask them. and we encourage you to register, and we look forward to seeing a lot of you in Washington.
Great. And I want to re-emphasize, this is Ken again, what Sam said, is that my experience is that a lot of local and regional industry stakeholders, some have had experience coming to Washington, but many have not, and they love it. They love coming to Washington. It's fun if they've never been on Capitol Hill and gone to meetings, and many of them, don't necessarily interact with the federal agencies and learn about the programs, and so they get visibility. It's a great bonding experience, so it's a great way to build relationships with those people, and they really, really enjoy the trip. So spreading the word to your stakeholders and encouraging them to come, in my experience, it's usually a great experience for them. So with that, thanks everybody. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you in Washington in April.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.